Welcome to this week's episode of Promising Young Surgeon. Today, we're talking about something that many of us will face at some point in our careers, and it's a period of transition. Some like to call it the pivot year. This is a year of significant change and growth where we may shift our focus, explore new opportunities, or redefine our professional identities. Dr. Fariha Shafi joins me today for thought-provoking discussion. But first, I'd love to open by sharing a few of my favorite excerpts from Brianna Wiest's book entitled The Pivot Year. I hope you find the courage to change your life. In the small ways, in the big ways, in every way that matters. I hope you do not end this story with a heart full of regrets. I hope you do not spend your years just waiting for your life to begin. I hope you realize that this is not the practice run. This is not the preview. This is it. There is nothing to do but leap. There is nothing to do but allow yourself to exist as boldly and honestly as you can. You will think you have forever, but you do not. It all happens, and it happens quickly. You are not waiting on another person, or the right timing, or for everything to fall into place. You are waiting to feel ready enough to exist within the questions, to not need every answer, and to know that this life does not come to us to be perfectly understood, but to be fully experienced in every direction we can possibly reach. So that's one of my favorite excerpts, and I wanted to share that, but I do have a second one that I think goes in my Hall of Fame of passages, and we'll go through that today before I get Dr. Shafi introduced. Temporary. Everything. All of it. Even the best of it. Especially the best of it. We only have so many years to know human love and do human things. Love them, all of them, even the painstaking ones. They too will not last. They are human. They are the experience. The insecurity, the experience. The heartache, the experience. The confusion, the experience. The joy, the experience. The risk, the experience. There is nothing lost if we learn something from it. Your willingness to fail is proportionate to your potential to gain and to grow. The timer never stops running. All you will regret is not reaching harder for the things you actually wanted while they were still in front of you. Now I'd like to introduce our esteemed guest, Dr. Fariha Shafi. She is a dedicated, passionate physician educator. She's a professor of medicine and practices in academic hospitalist capacity at the University of Missouri, Kansas City School of Medicine and University Hospitals. She has served as a docent mentor in the university's highly sought-after 6-year combined BA and MD program for 18 years, in addition to her clinical duties. She has mentored hundreds of students, residents, and faculty, and has been recognized for her efforts with the Betty Drees Excellence in Mentoring Award and the Excellence in Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Awards, among many others. Dr. Shafi completed her medical education at the Universidad Tecnológica de Santiago in Santiago, Dominican Republic, graduating with honors. She completed her residency in internal medicine at the State University of New York in Buffalo. Dr. Shafi is board certified in internal medicine and obesity medicine. Her interests include physician well-being, gender equity, and formal mentoring and coaching programs and advocacy. She is an American College of Physicians certified well-being champion. She is also the co-chair for the Wellness Committee at the American Medical Women's Association. She serves in leadership roles within the Missouri State Medical Association and the Kansas City Medical Society, and advocates for issues related to public health, diversity, equity and inclusion, and related initiatives with physician well-being. She is married to her wonderful husband for the past 24 years, and together they have 2 beautiful children and equally lovable cats. She strongly believes in community engagement and serves in multiple roles within the Blue Valley School District and also serves on board of directors for the Blue Valley Educational Foundation. When she has free time, she loves to cook, read, sing, and binge watch shows on Netflix. Thank you so much for being here today, Dr. Shafi. I'm very excited to get into this topic with you. I do think that you've had such a rich career, tons of experience, and it's exciting to hear about your pivot year, and really get into the details here. But can you first start by telling us about how you got into medicine and what your practice has looked like for over a decade on the outpatient side?
Yeah, sure. So I got into medicine because I grew up admiring my dad, who's an internist, and at the lovely young age of 78 years old, he still practices almost full time. And I really enjoyed watching what he had become to his patients, or how he would be administering care. And it was not just ordering medications or whatnot. It was just the empathy, the care, and getting to see his patients as people. And I think that really had a profound impact on me. I think one of the big things is, you figure out it's a long road. Do you really want to do this or not? And for my family, they were always like, whatever you do, do it to the fullest and be sure that this is where you find your joy. So I think that part was easy because I don't think I ever doubted my career choice. I wanted to be an educator because the other big influence in my life is my mom, who still, as she travels and visits all her kids all around the world, we live in 3 different continents. She has students everywhere. And in fact, last night she was at a dinner with a student who found her somehow. So that was the other factor. So I think it was really easy figuring out like how I would join these 2 huge influences in my life. And as and when I finished my degree, I think it was very obvious to me that I wanted to do academic medicine. And that's really what my career has been, not just for the past decade, but almost 2 decades now. And I have loved mostly every minute of it. And as far as outpatient medicine, to be really honest, I really have not practiced only outpatient medicine ever. My primary care practice was both inpatient and outpatient for the past 18 years. So it's been great. I think one of the hardest things that I've had to do in my life is having to say goodbye to my patients this past couple of months ago when I switched from my traditional practice to complete hospital medicine. And it's really hard because, I mean, it's still in the same organization. I love where I work. And so sometimes the patients will catch me in the cafeteria or in the lobby and they're like, I can't believe you did that to me. So yeah, that's been the hard part, but it's been lovely building relationships, seeing patients come such a long way with you. And really appreciating you for what you've done for them. And I appreciate them because I think they've enriched and fulfilled my lives in my life in ways that I probably, can't even mention.
Wow. Well, that is an interesting point that you're still at the same institution and maybe running into your old patients. I hadn't thought about that angle. When I was a resident, I did go through witnessing one of our attendings, transitioning. He moved to a new location. And for about probably 3 months up until his departure date, at each of the visits, he did kind of approach this difficult conversation with his patients where he'd provided them like really incredible, compassionate cancer care for years and years. And he was telling them, goodbye and I'm moving out of state. Do you have any tips for approaching that conversation? I don't even know. I think that everyone probably comes up with their own language for that, you
Yeah,
know?
I think for me, it's the preparation. I mean, I kind of knew for over 8 months that I was going to make this transition. And I was just hoping that you know, I wish I had a year to slowly tell every single one of my patients by myself, that this is your last visit with me, so on and so forth. Unfortunately, I think the way logistics and all of that work, I still had time. I think I would say a little over 3 months to prepare my patients by the time we were ready with all the clinic logistics and everything on, how to transition that. But to be really honest, I think for a lot of them, the ones that I had taken care of from the time that I had joined as a brand new attending, I did start telling them already that I'm not probably, not probably, that probably I'm not going to be doing clinic anymore in 8 months. And I think setting the stage is important. When they would come for their clinic visit, I would mostly, say, deal with the thing. And then I would be like, all right, now there's going to be a part we're going to talk about, and it might make you happy, it might make you sad. But I want to be the person telling you this. And so I would talk about that. And some of them just stopped at that. We did our little tears sharing, hugs sharing, and they would be okay with with that I'm just making a change, and they'd be like, we respect that, we understand, you have to do what's good for you. And some of them would want an explanation. So I had my script ready on, these are the reasons, it's not you, this is what's happening in my life, and this is what I need to do. And I feel like, sometimes the students would be like, why do you feel like you owe them an explanation? And I was like, because we're family in a weird sort of way, right? Like, sometimes I feel like for patients whose families live far away, or for me, myself, where my family does not live here, I spend more time with my patients, and they probably spent more time visiting me than, they did. So a lot of them, so much about them, you have so many conversations, you become a part of their life. And I feel like I, if they want an explanation, I feel like I owe it to them. I don't want them to feel like I'm just abandoning them because I'm mad at the world or something. But if they wanted to know, I shared and I was honest. And the kind of love they showered and the kind of prayers they would give you, because they're like, we understand. And yes, you have to do this. And sometimes it actually made the conversation go a lot better. But, yeah, that's kind of what I did. And I do think making sure that they're also getting a written kind of heads up is super important. And I know majority of the places do that. Sometimes, that happens way later than after you've already left, and then the patients get upset. But I feel like my department realized, that the relationship had been such a long one that they were kind of trying to get ahead of the game and, send the letters out to the patients. So it was nice when towards the last month patients came, they would say, we already know. And, they'd bring their little gifts and everything. So yeah. Yeah, I think having the conversation way ahead of when you're going to make the transition is a good idea. And I think maybe like a 3-month period to let patients get used to that concept, especially if you're somebody who's been with them for so long, is a good idea.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. As we think about, like, it's very easy for me to picture, what kind of care I would want my family members to receive. And I think that hearing it directly from their longtime physician does mean a lot. So certainly I appreciate, and I'm sure they really appreciated you taking the time to talk to all of them about it. So how many years were you seeing patients in clinic? So like how long were your longest relationships on that end before the change?
2006 is when I started my present job, October. So that's 18 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah. It was a long time. It was a
it's like
long.
one generation almost,
Yeah.
of care.
Yeah. And truly, it has been that way. Like, a lot of my patients were where I was seeing the grandma, the mom, and and the kids, because over years, then, they refer their family members to you. So you're really taking care of entire families. And, um, sometimes you kind of have to be careful about what's coming out of your mouth, because there's a lot of dynamics and stuff. But yeah, it was entire families. And there would be times when the students would be frustrated because the husband and the wife want to be in the same room and they want to be seen together, and the students are like, how are we going to do these 2 visits together? I'm like, all right, we can figure this out. But yeah, 18 years.
Oh my gosh, I get a lot of husband wife combos as well. Sometimes what's tricky for me is I get some sibling pediatric visits, like 2 to 3, and they'll be close in age and the
Yep.
same gender. So I'm like, okay, tell me what your first name is, and get them all sorted out and just really make sure that you're taking care to separate these kids who are like maybe 4 and 5, both
Absolutely.
young men. Um, I think that that's really wonderful. And I appreciate that you called out how your students maybe questioned some of your approach to this, just because, you know, there is so much conflicting information that we get on our journey to becoming physicians, and even as, an early attending. Because I will tell you, it reminds me of one of my first questions when I graduated from training. I moved out, I'm in solo practice. I'm in a rural community hospital. And I did not know if I wanted to give my personal cell phone number out to patients or not. And that was a big question because I had a couple mentors who told me that they gave their number to every single patient that they operated on or did any type of procedure on. And then yet I knew some other younger attendings who were like, oh my gosh, absolutely not. And you'll regret it if you do. And so there are these interesting decisions that we all make individually, but kind of based on our own values and comfort level with figuring out where that line is going to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think as we evolve as physicians, that's important because we see so many different styles of practice. And then you kind of have to see which one gels with you. And if you want a question, I always invite questioning. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. In fact, I think I've learned so much over the years from my students, maybe questioning something or giving me their own perspective. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't think of it this way. And as time evolves, I feel like we need to evolve as human beings. We're not always living in the same kind of society. Our society has evolved so much, I think, in the past few decades. I mean, just with information technology, we've had this surge of so many other things happening. I remember during COVID, we were trying to figure out, how to do these televisits, how to incorporate student education, how to do this. And the students had some really great feedback on, how we could make sure that this worked for them or how they were part of the clinical encounter. And I think we were able to deliver the kind of care to the best of our abilities during that time that we could. And the patients were appreciative of that.
I got to say, one of my favorite things about you is that the first time we ever talked, you brought this up. You just talked about your longtime experience as a clinical educator. You have so many learners at different levels with you, really throughout your career. And you told me about receiving questions, receiving feedback and receiving questions. And you really, like, for any doctor, I mean, for any person, for any adult person, let alone like a physician, to say, hey, I welcome any and all questions. And if you think that I could be doing something differently or better, I would love to hear that. Come to me with that information, and I'll give it a very, very sincere thought, and I'll come back to you. And I just really love that, because I think that makes you the type of clinical educator that we all need more of, because that does not exist everywhere. It takes a really high level of humility, I think, to be able to say that and to welcome those questions.
I will say, though, if I step into my students or my residents' shoes, I don't know, even though I say that, how many of them fear retaliation because of the unfortunate environment that we have in medical education. I don't know how many of them can be honest, but I try to be as transparent, as friendly, as approachable as I can be to my students so that they can tell me what I could do better. A recent example, I was on inpatient service, and this I'd had a conversation with a student and I gave them feedback, and I noticed that the student kind of got a little teary-eyed, and I realized, oh my gosh, she's not from my team, doesn't really understand my tone. I think maybe I overstepped my bounds. So we were doing these, I do these mid-rotation feedbacks. So I sat her down and I was like, I just wanted to extend an apology. I think the way that I handled the situation that day was not very good. I should have used a better tone or a better method, and it will not happen again, and so on and so forth. So this kid, the senior, comes back for his evaluation, and I was like, and he doesn't know me. This is his first time rotating with me ever. And I was like, do you have any feedback for me? He goes, yeah. So let me just start off by saying, I've loved this entire rotation except, and then he brings back that time. I'm like, already evaluated that, already did an internal feedback, already apologized, already done. So yes, thank you so much. And I love that, because I feel like sometimes, if it's somebody that's just coming and rotating on your team that doesn't know your style of teaching, doesn't know, that to me was such a nice reiteration that they felt comfortable coming to me and telling me, hey, this was wrong, or you shouldn't have done something like that. And I think over the years, there's so much that I have tried to change. And sometimes they might not give you the feedback face to face. They'll give it in writing. And earlier on, I remember as a young attending, it would hurt my feelings because, you don't go in there with the intention of making anybody's day miserable. But yeah, sometimes it's your style of teaching, or if you don't know how to do something. And One of the students actually had written, it's not going to kill you to give somebody a compliment. You point out our mistakes, but you don't give us enough compliments. So I've incorporated that consciously to make sure that if somebody's doing something well, that I'm complimenting them on their performance, just to make sure that they know they did something right and they can continue to work on it. So these are just two examples, but I feel like as long as after that initial shock of, oh my God, I can't believe this is what they said about me after I, worked my tush off to give them the best experience. And you take a deep breath and you relax and you just try to, figure it out step by step on, why would somebody have construed it this way? Or what could I have done differently? And, get yourself coached or coach yourself and educate yourself. I think you can always better yourself. I think we all agree none of us are perfect. And every single day is, like you said, an opportunity to learn, to do something differently, to improve on yourself as a human being, not just as a physician. So I think we can all use periodic feedback to do that.
Totally. And I think of when you talk about basically like the iterative changes and all the feedback you've incorporated and this really elevated, point you're at now, I think of how I've started calling myself like Frances May 3.0. Like I'm doing pretty good. 2.0 was better than the original, 3.0 even better. I'm nowhere near where I want to be, which is probably going to be version, like 30.
Yeah.
But yeah, perhaps you can kind of relate to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I don't know what version I'm at, to be really honest, but yeah, I think, and at some point in time, you realize that some of the things that have enhanced you, and it's not just your students or whatever. I feel like some of my friendships and my relationships are so lovely, where we are honest and we all want to be living our own authentic lives, and we want to be, practicing what we preach or walk the talk or whatever. And if we do something that doesn't come off as that, I love the fact that my husband will put me in place, my kids will put me in place, my friends will do that. But that's because they have the permission to do that. And there's a reason they have a permission, because I want to make sure that at the age of 46, I am trying to live my most authentic self. I am trying to do what I really intend to do, because you don't want people to feel spam. You're telling somebody you are this, but the way that you're, acting is not living up to that. And I think that's important for us to do, is make sure that we're trying to be true to ourselves, and in turn, hopefully fostering great relationships in that process.
I love that. I can really relate to what you're saying, because I am in that stage of wanting that level of honesty and honest feedback. And you're right, because sometimes it does sting. Like, sometimes for me, it goes back to a lot of the lies that we tell ourselves or build up over the years, not intentionally, because I'm a person who would say, no, I don't lie ever, not to other people, not to myself. Okay, well, on close examination, there are all sorts of lies that we tell ourselves. And so it's kind of about like stripping those away, which does involve various levels of, very painful but helpful feedback from others, things that we maybe don't see about ourselves, which, yes, certainly my husband is able to say, well, no, I knew that about you the whole time. You weren't ready to hear it. But now that I've come to him and said, okay, I am ready to hear it, you're invited to provide me honest feedback. He's like, oh yeah, I have notes like you weren't ready to hear before. So, you've alluded to it, but I'd love to hear about what your current new practice model looks like, and really what drove you to make this big change this year.
So really, one of the big factors was realizing that my parents are not getting any younger. And so the initial conversation started with me needing to carve time out just, for just in case moments. So my parents still live in Kashmir, which is, on a crazy direct flight from Chicago, Newark, I'm still looking at 28 to 30 hours of travel time. From where I'm at. So they're very far. And I just wanted more flexibility, to be able to take care of them if need be. They're still pretty independent. They still like to be very independent, but they have now health issues that do require a little bit more monitoring. The other big thing was, I think I have been able to do whatever I wanted to do with my life because my youngest sister, who has now moved to Australia, basically, was our anchor for our parents. And she had lived in Kashmir pretty much most of her life. And this year they transitioned over, to move to Australia. And it was just like, all right, well, we don't have somebody to depend on 24/7, which is what she did. And so I just wanted, the siblings to be able to shift some of that, responsibility, or what say, though my mom and dad will tell you, live your own lives. We don't need help. We got this covered. But, so I just wanted to have that flexibility. The other big thing was that it's finally my year of being an empty nester. My little one went off to college also. And I was like, well, I have to figure out what to do with my life. Like, how do I want to enrich it? Because for a lot of times, I loved the way my schedule worked because it just gave me a lot of predictability. I was able to be there for my kids. I was able to coach, their science Olympiad team, and I was able to be at their band competitions and whatnot. So that was important to me at that time. And now that's kind of gone. So it's kind of been great to be able to incorporate a schedule where you're working hard, but then you actually get time to decompress and have time to yourself. And I think I've been yearning for that, just to further figure out what it is that I want to do with the rest of my time. How do I want to spend it? Do I want to get more education? Do I just want to travel? Do I just want to binge watch Netflix, or do I want to sleep? What do I really want to do? So I think that was a big factor. And my immediate boss and our chair were very, very accommodating in that matter, I should say. And they were like, well, let us know what will fit what it is that you want to do. And I really didn't want to do a part-time primary care job, because to all the primary care people out there, we all know it does not exist. So I just did not want to do that. And then I talked it over with my boss, and he suggested maybe trying this. And actually, the hospitalist model was the first job that I had started right out of residency. So it was not new to me. And I'd constantly been doing inpatient medicine. So I was like, sounds like a plan. Let's give it a try. And, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We can always go back. We can always pivot again. It can be my pivot 14.0 or whatnot.
Yeah.
But so far, it's been a couple of months, and I think I'm loving it.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. What does your current schedule look like in general?
So it's not one of those classic 7 on, 7 off schedules, because I know a lot of people get burnt out with that. We, as a group, we are required to do an X number amount of weeks of inpatient coverage per year. And then the rest, we generally, if you know what your year is going to look like, you can request, hey, can I have off this week, and this week, or these 2 weeks, or these 3 weeks? And for me, I prefer to have bigger chunks of time off, because if I need to travel overseas, I can't do that in a week. So my schedule's kind of really nice, where it's not super predictable month to month, in the sense that I might work 3 weeks on and then I get 2 weeks off, or I might work 1 week on and 1 week off. So it varies. But the big thing is I end up getting majority of the time off where I need to be off. So like recently I got invited to host a workshop again at ACP in New Orleans. And I hadn't initially planned on going, and they were wanting us to come back and do a workshop, and my colleagues really wanted to go also. So these are the friends that I run the workshop with. So I requested some time off, and it just makes it so much easier to swap days, which is so hard to do when you're covering inpatient and you're trying to get, outpatient and you're trying to get inpatient coverage. This is easy because it's day swap and it's inpatient to inpatient coverage. So it makes it a lot more flexible for me.
That's awesome. What will your workshop be on at the upcoming meeting?
So we used to call it personal branding, but we have rebranded, and depending on where we're doing it, we rebranded a million different ways. But this is more talking about making, how to be visible and how to create your vision and mission statement. And seems like most of the residents, fellows, and younger faculty, and even people, I think, in mid-career really enjoyed it. On kind of what I talked about, how to showcase, and in today's world, really broadcast your authentic self on what it is that you want to do in your personal and professional lives. So that's what we're going to be doing. We help people create their mission, vision statement, kind of like how we used to do, your elevator speech. So it's a variation of that. But then through the workshop, we sit and we help them pick what their biggest characters are, and then they get real time feedback. So that's what we're going to be doing. And then we do a workshop on narrative medicine, which we've talked about before. It's very therapeutic and lovely. I think it's one of the best well-being workshops, or I say most well-received well-being workshops
Yeah,
we've
I
done.
love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That definitely, it's very enriching. Most of us don't get that in our formal, certainly undergrad medical school or resident or fellow curriculum. And so that's awesome. I'm not surprised at all that people like clamor for this stuff, and really appreciate when you guys bring that skill set and just really bring that perspective to them, because most of us during training, we are keeping our heads down and studying and not thinking about ourselves even in that way, in that broader way.
Yeah, and especially at this time, students are applying for residencies, and then they're trying to get prepared for these residency interviews. And what do we talk about? Like, how do we present ourselves? And so I like to do these snippets, or what we call mini but mighty skills, miniature versions of the workshop, and just help them figure out, how do you present yourself? Because I don't know what my interview prep was like for my residency interview. I don't think it was to the level that students prepare for now, and they have to. It's a very competitive situation out there. So yeah, I think it has a place for everyone, and I especially like doing it for students, residents, especially when they're trying to look for their first job or trying to get to their interviews, and trying to communicate who they are in those 15 minutes.
Yeah, I can remember from my preparation and training for interviews, 100% of the emphasis was on who you are, what your qualifications are. So hammer the content down really well. It was not about how do you come off to other people? How
Mm-hmm.
can you come off better to other people? How can we make sure that they're not misinterpreting your body language or things like that? I really think this next level of depth and the types of skills that you're talking about, they are very high yield, because it is just not enough to show up and have the content be phenomenal. Your accolades are phenomenal, the content's phenomenal, but there is something about you that is maybe off-putting to the interviewer. Guess what? Now you get a, -2 on that. And I do feel like that's one of the things that 10 years ago, that was not really said out loud. Now it's like, don't even get your feelings hurt. Now, if people tell me there's something I'm doing that's off putting, I'm like, thank you for pointing that out to me. Now I'll go back and workshop. But it's funny because multiple things have to be true. You have to accept, number one, that there can be a variety of off putting things about any of us, me probably more than most. And then number two, the fact that we can change. And that kind of goes back to, I love to talk about, and in my professional development, talks, I always bring up the charisma myth. The myth is that you're born with it or you are not, and that it's directly related in some fixed way to outgoingness or attractiveness. But it's like, that is not so. And so it's a really empowering fact that is not so. And again, all of our young doctors or our young, med students, they are really brilliant, adaptable people. You just have to give them and really, I think, spell out this skill set that's like, you can totally just machine learn this the same way that you brilliantly learn
Everything.
else. Yeah, exactly. Really.
And to your point, I think, it comes back to the point that we're all very coachable. I think we are successful in what we do because we are coachable. If we weren't, I don't think we would have had successful careers, right? So I think because that coachability exists, telling a student, hey, don't stress out and don't freak out. It's not that you don't know your material. You're just having a panic attack when you present because of X, Y, and Z. And I can coach you through this. And the relief that you see on their face is like, are you serious? So you don't think I'm stupid? I'm like, no, I can see what's happening to you. And these are the things that we can do to get from this point to this point. And we just have to practice, just like everything else. We have to practice. And then you see them transform over the years. Oh my gosh. It's just like, I feel like at that point you realize, okay, everything was worth it, because you see that transformation in these kids, because they put their heart and soul into everything that they do. And I think the fact that you choose to do this to your life, right? Spend all these years when you could have had a job after 4 years of college and you could have been doing really well for yourself. You chose to do this. And you are dedicated to your profession, and your ability to then take that to the next level, not just professionally but personally also, to see that and see that personal growth, develop that person in you. I think that's very heartwarming, because in a lot of other professions, like if you were in business or even if you were in law school and so on, I think that coaching and people guiding you through steps is like a part of it, right? I mean, my husband, when he was doing his MBA, it was interesting. Like they would have these group discussions, and then they would have these workshops on how to present X, how to present Y. I'm like, nobody teaches us that, and that's a big part of what we do, how you're presenting yourself. Like we're all getting marked on whatever your patient satisfaction scores. Well, you pull that out before coaching people on how to improve your scores. It's not that we were all bad physicians or we couldn't do it. And then we get frustrated because you feel like people are just penalizing you for doing your best version of your job. So I think all those things, if we can put them in place at the right time, especially I love that you do your dialectical behavioral therapy. And I know the feedback you get is we should have had it sooner and sooner and sooner. So you realize there's a lot of this thing that call coaching or directing in a way we should be doing earlier and earlier in our lives, because a lot of the rest of the stuff, I mean, you live in the stage of the internet, you can learn it anywhere. I mean, people, I think our kids are very smart. Med students generally, if they've gotten to the level that they have, they're generally smart. They know
Yeah.
how to figure it out. But yeah.
Agreed. No, that's very true. So, for many of us as physicians, as surgeons, the idea of making a significant change in our careers can be very daunting. And so, what do you think are some of the common fears, common hurdles, or frankly, excuses that people come up with when they're considering a big change, and maybe they even know that it would be right for them, but there's all these hangups?
I think the biggest thing is failing and not being able to financially make it work. And I think failing as physicians is our biggest fear, right? Because we always work hard, we excel, we try to do the best. And it's like, okay, I'm going to make this change. Well, what if it doesn't work out? What if I make a mistake? And what if it's the wrong thing? We're afraid of all of those. And I would say for somebody at my stage of life, I definitely don't want it to be, I would say majority of those don't want it to be a financial mistake, because here you are trying to, pay for kids' school or figure out how to pay for retirement. You don't want a lot of those things to impact that negatively. So I think it's that fear, and most of us are afraid of discomfort. That's the other problem. I think we get stuck in our routine and everything's going fine. We're getting our benefits paid for. We're getting health insurance paid for. We're getting all of that. And then now suddenly you want to pivot and do something different, and you're putting all of that at risk. I don't think most of us are very good risk takers. And I would say, I've joined these women finance groups and physician finance groups, and there are very few people that I see on those groups that are gutsy, that are doing things like outside the box and trying to think differently or trying to do innovative stuff. Most of us are like, yeah, this feels safe. Let's just stick to it. So I think it's that discomfort of losing that safety cushion that is the hardest thing. And I think that prevents most of us from really, like you said, going out and taking a leap of faith on ourselves and believing that you can do it. Because all these years, I think I don't know that in our education anyone has ever taught us, it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to be uncomfortable, and it's okay for something not to work and you can pivot. It's always like expected that you will do everything to perfection and not fail and not make a mistake. So I think that kind of goes this is completely antagonistic to our belief system of education. So that's the hardest thing, I think.
Yeah, I think that's all very well said. And you're so right. I guess that forces me to just kind of think, when I was a kid, yes, in school, there is a point where it's okay to make a mistake. Like, it's not the end of the world. You did this math problem a little wrong. Like, that's okay. Let's just think through it. Like, what principle did you miss? Um, but then something very much happens, maybe in maybe in medical school. I guess that for me, I would say that it probably came fourth year of medical school, because that's when away rotations, sub-Is start, which is like a sub internship for those who have not had those rotations or encountered that. But that's where, you spend a month at a time at a bunch of different institutions. In my case, doing ENT, like rotating with these departments. And you're a sub intern, but, almost like a practice interview for an intern. And the practice interview lasts a month, and you are expected to be flawless on it. Like, so when I have to think of a time where like there's a hard turn and suddenly it's, you can't make mistakes anymore, because certainly in medical school, I had a very supportive learning experience. And even as a third year on clerkships, like there was definitely a lot of grace and kindness towards like, you're not expected to know everything. You're an M3, but from M4 on, certainly my whole residency experience, it was expected that you would be flawless, you'd be perfect, somehow not make mistakes, even though like this is your first rodeo at, a surgical residency. And what I like to call some of the process that you're describing is the conveyor belt. I call it the conveyor belt because you're so right. We just get on this course where, so I was about probably 18 when I got on the conveyor belt. And the next 10 years were very clearly laid out for me. Like no need to be creative and no need for uncertainty at all. Like those just don't factor in, because you would say, okay, applying for medical school, then I know what happens after medical school. I go to residency. And then I know what happens after residency, maybe fellowship if I want, but otherwise just attending life. And what's so funny, that's why it took me until my attending life to even look around and be like, oh, do I like this? Do I want to be here? Like, I feel like the last time where I made a conscious, thoughtful decision, do I want to be here or not, was when I was 18. And so that's kind of a scary way to wake up in your early 30s and look around and say, whoa, this was all just, I stayed on the conveyor belt, which a lot of us are very good at doing. Like, again, going back to the machine learning, like I can do anything for 12 years, I guess,
Yeah, and the other part about that, Frances May, is that you have to think it's very difficult to get to that point and think, do I really want to do this or not? Because the part that sometimes we forget is majority of us are tied to these education loans and debts, right? So I think that financial burden also stifles creativity or our ability to look back and figure out, because it's not like, oh, this is, so on and so forth for undergraduate education and whatnot. I mean, medical education is expensive, ridiculously expensive. And now here you've compromised all these years, and now you're graduating, and then you're graduating with this, debt load of money that you have to pay back. I think that all those factors go in, and it's more like, all right, I don't like what I am doing. Maybe I should pivot and try something else. And then this number is chasing you all the time. What do you do with that? So there are so many things that are very unique to, I think, the medical profession that also stifle that creativity and that ability to, sit down and look back and see, is this really what I want to do? Can I quit after M2 because this is not for me? And then everybody's like, you're halfway there. I will tell you, I loved something that my daughter said when we were trying to pick colleges and where she wanted to go. And, this whole time she thought she wanted to do this combined program. And she got into pretty much every one she applied to, which we were very proud of. And then we're sitting there, and I took her to every single one of them. I was like, go look at these places physically, get the vibe, and see what you want. And then the hardest decision for her, and I could see the stress of picking this, she sat down, and then finally she goes, guys, I've made this Excel spreadsheet or whatever they do, Google Docs. I've color coded everything. I've done everything. And I've realized this. For those 4 years of security, I can't kill the 4 years of myself as a growth. I can't sacrifice these 4 years. I want to have fun in college. I want to have a college experience. And my husband and I got so teary eyed because, we never had these opportunities. So I do see that, they do have that privilege of picking. And I was like thinking, I think I did something right. I think what I have been saying over the years maybe has conveyed that I'm being true and authentic about this, because my kid, even though being a South Asian kid, is giving up this guaranteed opportunity to go find herself and find her life and have fun and have an experience. And she goes, guys, I'm grateful for everything. And I know this is what it looks like. This is where I want to go. And we just shut her laptop. We're like, that's where you're going to go. We're done. End of discussion. We just want you to be happy and figure yourself out. And that was a big deal. I mean, I think that was a big time of growth for us as parents to realize it's okay, we're going to be fine. And I think it was a big step for her too, because this whole time, you're again looking for that safety, security guarantee and getting on the conveyor belt. And I'm going to tell her, I am so glad you chose to get off of it. So, yeah.
Oh, you gave me goosebumps. That's a beautiful story. And so I appreciate you sharing that with us. But certainly, like, I guess I want to be her when I grow up. Like, that's very wise of her. And it sounds like, yes, I think it's interesting because obviously we as kids really do absorb the kind of rhetoric and example that our parents set out for us at home, like what you're saying. You've really been walking this different walk. And so she kind of maybe chose the path less traveled.
Yeah.
Which,
yeah. And to be really honest, I think it was important that we were both on the same page. So truly, my husband's been a real amazing partner parenting wise, because I know sometimes it can be hard if we're not on the same page as far as that. But that really helped because, we said that we were going to give our kids this and we stuck to it. And we're both South Asian. We're both, our houses back in Kashmir are like 25 minutes from each other. We grew up in the same environment. So that change in mentality, it's been a work in progress. It has been.
absolutely. Well, that ability to grow together and, like you're saying, be in step. Certainly, as I mentioned, earlier, my husband and I, like, we always give a little time to catch up. Like, it took me longer to get to this stage. He's like, no worries. Literally, I've known for years some things that you're going to learn this year. That sounds good. Just had patience for me during that time. So, on a more personal note, how do you personally stay motivated and centered during periods of significant change, like this year?
I think a lot of it really goes back to self-reflection, a lot of self-reflection. And I think don't get me wrong, there are big times where I go through self-doubt and go through pockets of burnout, and then I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing, and the couch with the next Netflix binge sounds the best. But really, I think one of the things that I've consciously taken on in the past couple of years is coaching. Some of it is formal, some of it is informal. Most of my formal coaching is from somebody who's not even related to the medical profession, but just to sit and air out what I'm going through and then get out of that lull and go back and get on the horse and go to, what are these things that I want to do or not do sometimes. The other informal coaching, really, a lot of kudos and I should say gratitude goes to my friend Marian McCrary, who is actually a coach, but does a lot of, I would say, uncompensated coaching for me. And she has been one of my best sounding boards during those lull times. And I think, every month I try to find a weekend when she has some time off and just decompress and go over stuff. And I think it's important to do that. Like, I was actually talking to my kids about this. It is so important to surround yourself with people that motivate you, that reflect who you are. You are the company that you keep. So a lot of what you want to do, what you want to accomplish, or who you want to be really depends on the people that you surround yourself with. And I think that is really the other part of and the rest is easy. The rest is my family. I mean, I look at them, I look at my kids' faces, and I look at what they're doing in their lives and how they're growing. And personally, for me, that is a big factor in keeping me going. And then, of course, my biggest cheerleader, who's my husband, who is always supportive of everything that I want to do, whether it sounds logical or crazy to him. It doesn't matter. He's just like, all right, if this is what you want to do, this is what we're going to do, what we're going to do. But I feel that aside from that pocket that is always, leading you on, supporting you unconditionally, you do need to surround yourself by people who do take the time to get to know the real you, who are vested in you as a person holistically, and who are willing to have these conversations with you and, again, periodically get you back on the horse and help you growing. I mean, my friend Marianne, this year, she was very adamant that I am going to take this women empowerment conference with her, and started working on me for like a good year. And I was very committed. I said, all right, you've been saying this for 3 years. We're going to go. And I made it work with my schedule and everything else. So we're super excited. We're going to go together with a couple more of our friends and hopefully find some very enlightening and thought-provoking conversations. And I don't know when I come back what I'm going to do. We laugh about it. They're like, most of the people that come back actually end up switching their jobs out right after the conference because they feel so empowered to do it. I'm like, we'll see what it'll do. But I'm just excited to be in the company of highly motivated women physicians who have taken on the reins, or who intend to take on the reins and do something better, not just for themselves, but for our profession as a whole, which we do need. Because I think it's dying for a lot of women. So,
oh, absolutely. And it certainly does sound like you have an incredible village, there to support you. And that is necessary, because that kind of fills our cup and makes us maybe brave enough to receive all of the authentic feedback and ways to, become that next greater version of ourselves.
I didn't mean to put a plug into the conference, but the conference is called Brave Enough. So you just
okay. Yeah, I have to check that out. No, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I do want to, before we close up, share another quote from the pivot year that has really, I think resonated with me. Yes.
Yeah.
Almost when you least expect it, things fall into place. You realize that what left was making space for what was about to arrive. The quiet let you hear the guidance. The unhappiness forced you to make a move. The unsettledness made you keep seeking. The end ushered in a new beginning. The doors that closed turn you towards the ones that were opening. The lessons were always leading you. Every time you got it wrong, you were one step closer to having it right.
Beautiful.
So, Fariha, as always, it has been such a pleasure to discuss these thought-provoking topics with you. And for our listeners, if you're considering a pivot year, remember that it's an opportunity for growth. And with the right approach, it can certainly lead to a more fulfilling and aligned life. Fariha, where can our listeners find and connect with you online?
I don't use X that much anymore, but I am on Facebook, and I mean, that connects you to Instagram. And I'm happy to share my contact email. It's SHAFIF, my last name, first initial, at umkc.edu.
Wonderful. Thank you. We'll get that in the show notes. Follow me on Instagram at francismay.md and at Rethinking Residency. Visit my website, rethinkingresidency.com, to learn more about resident physician stories and ways that residents can most effectively navigate the game of residency. I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode of Promising Young Surgeon. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please subscribe and leave us a review, and feel free to share with your colleagues. If you have any questions to submit for future episodes, email me at pys@heyinfluent.com.